Breaking Bad. 5 seasons of watching a high school chemistry teacher transform into a drug kingpin.
Goddamn right.
But here's the thing, the show isn't just about making meth. It's about watching incredibly smart people make devastatingly stupid decisions. Every character from Walt to Jesse to Gus makes choices that seem logical in the moment, but end up destroying everything they care about. Today we're breaking down the biggest mistakes in Breaking Bad. Let's start with the mistake that started it all. Walt gets diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and instead of accepting help or finding legal ways to provide for his family, he decides to cook methamphetamine. Now, the show tries to sell us on the idea that Walt had no choice. He needed money for treatment, money for his family. But that's complete nonsense. And the show makes this clear if you're paying attention. Gretchen and Elliot, his former business partners, literally offer to pay for everything. His treatment, his bills, all of it. No strings attached. But Walt's pride won't let him accept it. He'd rather be a criminal than swallow his ego and take help. And that decision, that's the original sin of Breaking Bad. Everything, every death, every destroyed life, every catastrophe stems from this moment. Walt choosing his pride over his family's safety is the mistake that launches 1,000 other mistakes. And when he has enough money, we are talking millions, does he quit? No. Why? Because it was never really about the money or his family. Walt admits it himself in the finale.
I did it for me.
The man had multiple exit ramps. When he hit his original dollar amount goal, when his cancer went into remission, when he made millions with Gus, and when he made even more with his own operation. Every single time, he chose to stay in the game. The impact is obvious. His family gets torn apart, dozens of people die, and Walt himself ends up bleeding out in a meth lab, all because he couldn't accept charity from people who genuinely wanted to help. If Walt's original choice is the show's first mistake, Jesse's blind loyalty is the second. Jesse Pinkman is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Or, well, sometimes. Yet somehow he keeps trusting Walt even when it's painfully obvious that Walt is manipulating him. Time and time again, Walt lies, Walt endangers him, Walt uses him as a pawn, and Jesse just keeps coming back. Why is this huge? Because Jesse trusts him with everything. His girlfriend Jane dies partly because of Walt's involvement. His other girlfriend Andrea gets murdered. He gets enslaved and tortured by neo-Nazis. He loses his innocence, his friends, his entire life. And through it all, he keeps believing that Walt actually cares about him. Well, sometimes yes, he does care for Jesse, but the question is to what extent? Can he really see Jesse happy without him being there? In the end, he destroyed everything Jesse was happy about. The worst part, Walt does this deliberately. He knows Jesse is vulnerable, knows he's desperate for a father figure, and exploits that weakness over and over. The poisoning of Brock, a child, just to manipulate Jesse back onto his side, might be Walt's most sociopathic move. And Jesse falls for it. By the time Jesse finally figures out the truth, it's too late. He's already lost everything. Trust is supposed to be a good thing, but in Breaking Bad, it's a death sentence. Speaking of Jane, let's talk about the moment Walter White became irredeemable. Season 2, Episode 12. Walt goes to Jesse's house and finds him passed out with his girlfriend Jane. While trying to wake Jesse, Walt accidentally bumps into Jane, rolling her onto her back. Then she starts choking on her own vomit. Walt could easily turn her back over and save her life. Instead, he watches her die. This isn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This isn't self-defense. This is Walt making a calculated choice to let another human being suffocate to death because she's inconvenient to his plans. Jane was going to take Jesse away, maybe expose Walt's operation, so Walt just lets her die. The immediate impact is devastating enough. A young woman dies, her father is destroyed by grief, but the consequences ripple outward in ways Walt never anticipated. Jane's father, Donald, is an air traffic controller who returns to work too soon, consumed by grief, and causes a mid-air collision that kills 167 people. That's right, Walt's decision to let Jane die indirectly murders 167 innocent people. And here's the really sick part. Walt never shows genuine remorse for this. Let's talk about Gustavo Fring, the criminal mastermind who made one fatal error, thinking he could control Walter White. Gus is careful, methodical. He's built an empire by being smarter and more patient than everyone else. He vets his people thoroughly, he plans for contingencies, he eliminates threats before they become problems. So when he decides to hire Walt, despite obvious red flags, it's shocking. Walt is arrogant, he's reckless, he's emotionally unstable. Mike warns Gus repeatedly that Walt is going to be a problem, but Gus, seeing Walt's chemistry skills and thinking he can manage the risks, he thinks he's smart enough to keep Walt in line. Fatal mistake. Walt spends an entire season figuring out how to kill Gus, and when he finally makes his move with the nursing home bomb, it's brilliant and brutal. Gus's face literally gets blown off, all because he underestimated the depths of Walt. Gus should have killed Walt when he had the chance. Instead, his overconfidence got him killed. Hank Schrader is one of the best characters in Breaking Bad. He's a skilled DEA agent and a good man trying to do the right thing, which makes his final mistake so frustrating. When Hank finally gets Walt dead to rights, he lures Walt to the money in the desert, but instead of calling in backup, like you're supposed to do when arresting a major drug kingpin, Hank goes with just his partner Gomez. Why? Pride. The same flaw that destroys Walt destroys Hank. He wants to be the one to bring in Heisenberg. He wants the glory, the vindication. It's his own brother-in-law. He wants the satisfaction. That decision kills him. Jack's gang shows up, outnumbers them, and executes both Hank and Gomez in the desert. If Hank had swallowed his pride and called for backup, he'd probably still be alive. The arrest would have been clean, Walt would be in prison, and Hank would have been a hero. Instead, he's dead in the desert, and Walt is begging for his life. It's one of the most tragic moments in television history, and it's entirely preventable. You want to know what ultimately brings down Walter White's empire? A book. Gail Bedecker, the chemist Walt eventually has killed, gives Walt a copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass with an inscription, "To my other favorite Walt Whitman." It's a sweet gesture from a doomed man. And what does Walt do with this incriminating evidence? Does he destroy it? Hide it? No. He leaves it in his bathroom, on the back of the toilet where anyone can find it. Hank, taking a bathroom break at Walt's house, picks up the book, sees the inscription, and suddenly everything clicks. All of Hank's suspicions, all the weird coincidences, all the lies, they finally make sense. W.W. Walter White. Heisenberg. This is pure arrogance. Walt keeps the book as a trophy, a reminder of his victory over Gale. But trophies are evidence, and evidence gets you caught. If Walt had just thrown the book away, Hank might never have connected the dots. The Empire might have kept running. But no. Walt's ego demanded that he keep a souvenir, and that souvenir destroyed him. Gustavo Fring is meticulous, patient, and disciplined. He's built an empire by never letting emotions cloud his judgment. But there's one exception to this rule. Hector Salamanca. Years before the show begins, Hector kills Gus's so-called boyfriend. This creates an obsession that Gus just can't shake. Instead of killing Hector or just forgetting about him, Gus makes regular visits to the nursing home where Hector is trapped in a wheelchair, unable to speak, only able to communicate by ringing a bell. Gus goes there to show him who's now in charge, to basically flex, to remind Hector that he lost, that the Salamanca family is finished, that Gus won. It's pure psychological torture, and Gus loves every second of it. But this routine becomes his fatal weakness. Walt figures out that the nursing home is the only place Gus visits regularly outside of his normal operations. It's predictable, it's personal, and Walt exploits it brilliantly. He convinces Gus that Hector is talking to the DEA, sets up a bomb trap rigged to Hector's wheelchair bell, and waits. When Gus shows up for one more gloating session, ready to kill Hector for his alleged betrayal, he walks straight into the trap. Hector rings his bell one final time, and the bomb detonates. Both of them die instantly. Well, after that iconic shot of half of Gus's face blown off as he straightens his tie one last time. Here's the thing. If Gus had just dealt with Hector, killed him, ignored him, anything other than his regular torture ritual, Walt would have never found this opening. Gus's need for revenge, for that ongoing psychological victory over his enemy, created the one predictable pattern in his otherwise flawless operation. Pride and ego, man. They get everyone in this show eventually. Skyler White gets a lot of hate from Breaking Bad fans, which is kind of insane considering she's one of the only rational people in the show. But she does make one massive mistake, staying silent about Walt's crimes. When Skyler figures out what Walt is doing, she has options. She could go to the police, she could take the kids and run, she could divorce him and expose everything. Instead, she makes a calculated decision to stay, partly out of fear, partly to protect her children, and partly because Walt's manipulating her into believing the family is safer if she cooperates. This enables Walt's empire. Skyler launders his money through the car wash. She covers for him. She lies to Hank and Marie. Every time she chooses silence over action, she becomes more complicit in this operation. By the time she realizes how dangerous Walt truly is, it's too late. She's in too deep. The family is fractured. Her son hates her. She's trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Could she have stopped Walt earlier? Maybe, maybe not. But her hesitation and her hope that she could somehow manage the situation definitely prolonged the danger and made everything worse. Mike Ehrmantraut is the smartest, most competent criminal in Breaking Bad. He survived decades in the game by being careful, thorough, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. So, how does he die? He underestimates Walt. Mike knows Walt is dangerous. He tells Gus to kill him. He calls him a ticking time bomb. But once Gus is dead and they're working together, Mike makes the mistake of thinking he can handle Walt. That he can keep things professional and businesslike. Wrong. When Mike decides to leave town and retire, Walt demands the names of Gus's associates so he can have them killed. Mike refuses and tears into Walt, telling him he ruined the good thing they had and that he's a ticking time bomb. In a fit of rage at being criticized and defied, Walt shoots Mike. The careful professional who survived the cartel dies because he didn't realize how petty and emotional Walt could be. Mike's final words are perfect.
Let me die in peace.
Even in death, he's disgusted by Walt's neediness and self-justification. Before Hank's final mistake, he makes a years-long error, not suspecting Walt sooner. The clues are everywhere. Walt's sudden, unexplained income, his mysterious disappearances, his knowledge of chemistry, the matching physical description of Heisenberg, the fact that Walt's cancer goes into remission right when a new blue meth floods the market. But Hank doesn't see it. Why? Because Walt is his nerdy brother-in-law, the guy who can barely manage a classroom of teenagers, the guy who wears beige and drives a crappy Pontiac Aztek. There's no way that guy is a drug lord. The blind spot costs Hank years. While he's chasing other leads, Walt's empire grows. Walt covers his tracks. Walt becomes more dangerous. By the time Hank figures it out, catching Walt isn't just difficult, it's a death sentence. If Hank had been more open to the impossible, if he'd investigated Walt even a little bit earlier, maybe he could have stopped the entire operation before it spiraled. Maybe he'd still be alive. As Walt's empire starts crumbling and he needs muscle, he makes a decision that will eventually destroy everything. He hires Jack Welker and his neo-Nazi gang. On paper, it makes sense. Walt needs more people capable of violence who won't ask questions. Jack's crew can handle the prison hits that Mike's guys won't do. They're ruthless, efficient, and available. Perfect, right? Wrong. So very wrong. The problem with hiring psychopaths is that you can't control them. Walt thinks he can use Jack's gang as a tool, hire them for specific jobs, pay them, and send them on their way. But that's not how it works with people like Jack and Todd. Once you invite them into your operation, they don't just work for you, they become partners, and then they become your replacement. This becomes crystal clear in the desert when Walt calls Jack to save him from Hank's arrest. Walt even tries to call it off when he realizes what's about to happen. But Jack doesn't care about Walt's second thoughts. He shows up anyway, kills Hank and Gomez, and then, here's the kicker, steals most of Walt's money and takes Jesse as a slave. Jack laughs in his face. What's Walt going to do about it? call the police? Jack holds all the power now, and Walt is just the guy who opened the door for them. By the time Walt returns to New Mexico in the finale, Jack's gang has taken over the entire operation. They have his money, his formula, and his former partner. Walt has to massacre all of them just to restore some semblance of order to the chaos he created. When you hire violent criminals with no loyalty and no code, you're not hiring employees, you're creating your own destroyers. Walt thought he could use Jack. Instead, Jack used him, stole from him, and nearly killed him. So there you have it, the biggest mistakes in Breaking Bad. What do you think is the single biggest mistake in the show? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay out of the meth business.